department at the Fashion Institute of Technology, doing the third tutorial in our series of tutorials for the ring design process demo, showing how I design a ring using digital methods from beginning to end. For this portion of the tutorial, I'm actually on a Cintiq tablet, so first time I've recorded this way. Hopefully all will go well. So, picking up where we left off, I have my ring. It's right here. Okay. I'm going to try and gel it. See if I get an adverse effect from doing that. No, it looks okay. Because I would like to be able to see these reference images that I have while I'm at it. In fact, it's more comfortable for me to actually have my reference above where I'm working, so I'll put them there. Okay. I will label this template. I will label this sketch. And I will bring in a new layer to draw upon. Okay. And I like to have my template layer, if you'll remember, I take that transparency down to 70-80%, somewhere in there. Gives me a better lineup with the colors. I use the second to darkest gray on my platinum and diamond setup, and I am going to use white for my erase color. Okay, I'm ready to go. Sorry for that, I just had to retool considering I'm working from a different monitor. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to refine my setting. I don't want much grain anymore. Transparency is fine. I can see my under bezel here. I can no longer see my finger rest or gallery wire. I would assume that will be visible. Something like that. I also know I don't want my settings to be too straight. I want there to be bowing, a curve to this prong. And something I had considered as I thought this project through was doing double prongs on my setting, and I think that might be nice. So I think I'll do that. I think I will split this prong into two prongs. Now there becomes a question as to what happens as this prong or double prong intersects my mounting. I don't really have an answer for that off the top of my head as I'm drawing this. I will let the design kind of fill me in as I go. I can see in the flat top view I drew above that it does look like those prongs run straight into my mounting. That's important. Right here. So, and I actually recall that from my maquette now as I think about it. So actually I need to change my drawing a little bit down here below to reflect that. Okay, so these actually are going to run into my setting, my mounting. And my mounting is going to terminate against the under bezel. So that's going to happen over here as well. Double prong is going to come down and end into this, and then this, which does not have a corner in my mind, will come in and tie into the under bezel. Okay, I'll make more decisions about the front of the ring in a minute. While I'm up here, I'm going to go ahead and finish faceting the stone. Obviously, the maquette of a stone that I had in my library was not fully faceted. I often do that, and if it's a shape I don't use a great deal. It's faster to make the stone. And if I'm going to reduce the stone to a tiny scale, using it in my maquette building process, having all the facets is actually problematic. But it's easy enough to fill those facets in now. Okay, so now I want to come in here and address this sculptural motif. I have this the full thickness of the piece, which is about 2.5 millimeters. That would not be necessary in a real casting. In a real casting, this element would be half that thick. It would be recessed in the hollowed out portion of the ring. So I'm going to come and thin that out. I'll do the same over here. Okay, so that doesn't look so heavy. Now also, when I designed this up in here, I did not, in this view you can't see what happens in here. And what's happening in here is not very pretty. It's just ending out in the middle of nowhere. So I'm going to take this and swerve it back outward so that it would eventually tie into the shank. And I'll have to do that with the thickness of it as well. And I think I would like this to be opened up here a little bit. Okay. Over here, I'm not going to see it. It's going to run into the prongs. I don't have to draw it. It's not visible. I do not want any of this ring to have a hard corner. Certainly not this sculptural motif. And I think I could thin it a little bit more. So I have this. I want to repeat it on the other side. I do tend to look at both left and right as I'm doing something like this to make sure that they match as I'm drawing. It's easy to remember that I remove the corner, or I should say it's easy to forget that I remove the corner from one side of the motif and then not remove it from the other. And that's not good to do. That destroys this illusion that this whole thing was drawn by hand and that Rhino had no part in it. Okay. This thickness line is unnecessary. This would be a rounded edge. As would this. However, remember we've thinned this out, so in the opening of that hole, we would see that. Okay? And in my original drawing, I had a peak here. This actually came up, and there was a line. Okay, I'm going to carry some of this information over here. I'm not going to go crazy because this is the far side of the ring. Going to remove the corner. Going to remove the corner. Remove the corner. Remove the corner. The detail gets so fine over here at this point that it's really hard to see even what I'm looking at. What I can tell you is if it's hard for me to see what I'm looking at, it's going to be hard for the client to see what I'm looking at. So I am not going to overthink it. I believe I really don't know what's going on here. I could bring my maquette up and look at it. I'm just going to leave it sketchy. I am going to leave this thinner though, a little bit. Like so. I do want to round off this corner. Corner here as well, which will actually make this softer. And this softer as well. In fact, not only will it make it softer, but on this side, as the metal rolls away with a rounded edge, it'll get thinner. reflect that here. Because that corner is now gone. That's a subtle thing. If I was in a hurry, I may not bother. Okay. Now, there is a hard edge here. I'm going to leave this hard edge where this piercing takes place. What is a little frustrating is how heavy this looks in here. I'm going to let that be reduced a little bit towards the center, just because it makes a prettier ring. Now, I have a pretty shape in here in my top view. It does not show well from my 3/4 view, and that's just too bad. I know it's pretty in the finished piece. This is not a great view to show it from, and that's the peril of a 3/4 view. You don't get to see everything at once. Of course, you don't get to see everything at once in any view, so that's okay. I imagine I would see a little bit of this ring bore coming up in. Alright, I need to address whether or not I'm going to put an airline. This 1mm line that I had projected was to indicate whether or not I had an airline in this piece from the front. I think probably going to let it have a little bit of an airline to about here. It's going to show going a little bit farther on this side because of the rotation of the piece to about there. I want you to notice this crease right here. It's very important. This is what happens as this ring as a swelling shape overlays the ring underneath. It's really important. It's one of the hardest things to get when you draw it freehand. And Rhino gave it to us, so we're going to make sure that we don't throw it away. Over here it's interesting to see how it's affecting things, but we don't actually, it doesn't change the shape, so we don't have to worry about it. And there we go. There's an implied airline. Gonna let that finger rest come out. My under bezel. Okay. Okay, the last thing I do, I need to remove this corner, obviously. How much of this you leave, this line, depends on whether you're going to paint the piece or not. If you're going to do color indication, you can show that the changing in direction from top to side or top to front, you can show that with value. If you're not going to paint it, then it looks like this is a really fat piece of metal, and you've got to leave some kind of a break line here to show where the rounded curve is. Okay, so it depends on whether you intend to paint or not. This elbow here, even if it is authentic, and I doubt that it is because of the way things are rounded off, is ugly, so it's going to be taken away. Okay, and that should do it. That is my drawing. I want that to feel like a rounded shape. I want to know if I'm going to see the corner of this airline over here, so I'm going to draw a line back. The y-axis, as we refer to it in our 3/4 view lesson, is like that. So if I draw a line going that same direction from here to here, it ends about here. This thickness back in here is going to be about like that. So there would be just the slightest corner of that airline showing through on the other side. And that class is the finished drawing. Okay? So I'm going to do my Control-Alt-C version of copy, where it's copy merged. Drag a window, Control-Alt-C, Control-V. When I paste it in over here, you'll see a new layer. If I turn it off, nothing happens. But if I turn this layer off and the template layer off, you can see it's the only thing left. That's the drawing I did on top of my template. That's my template. These two files are no longer necessary. I'm going to leave them in, but I would normally discard them. Okay? I don't need my sketch anymore either. If I am going to keep things like this, normally I'll put them in a group. So I would call this my drawing layer. And then I would put these three together into a group. Just hold down Shift key, select them all, group my layers. And what I usually call a group like this is kit. It's my design kit. Okay, so now I have this layer. This layer I call Final Drawing. And I'm ready to go ahead and paint. I need it to be a gel layer. I want to see if it's going to change the consistency of this line work at all when I go gel, so I'll look very carefully at it as I hit gel. It doesn't, it stays consistent, so that's fine. If it had gone bad on me, if it had gone like a greasy or looks like a magic marker, if it had done that to me, I would have simply dropped it, drawn a selection window around again, R to get the selection tool, F to get the floater tool, picked it back up, and then gone gel with it. Letting it visit the canvas for a minute removes any of that strangeness. If it looks fine, you don't have to do that, but if it ever looks strange, make sure it's white canvas underneath, drop it, select it, pick it back up, and then gel it. Okay, so that's my drawing. I'm going to do my painting on my canvas. My ground coat is the yellow coat, is yellow ochre. I'm going to do this in yellow metal. I do my paint with almost no grain at all, and usually at about 50%, 45-50% opacity. You will notice that I am not careful about my stone at all. This is not gouache, so I don't have to worry about that. Now my eraser color is still white, but my drawing quote-unquote color is the gold. Painting a bigger area, I will use a bigger brush. This busy stuff in here, I'll just paint it all yellow. If I go outside of the lines, I don't usually pay a lot of attention when I'm working professionally. Two reasons. One is this thing's going to print very small, and the other reason is that I'll go in and clean that all up at the end. So cleaning it up each step of the way is tedious and wasted time. So that's good. I'm going to now do my shading color for the gold. Second from the bottom. Starting with my shading on the shank. Brush is a little big now for what I'm doing. This is painted like a cylinder, because that's what it is. It's a portion of a cylinder. I want this to be in shadow here to show that rounding of the shank. And because it falls away from the light source, especially into here. And I'll let it... Here's the challenge, because there's a little bit of shadow here as this cylinder goes under. So I'm going to actually let this portion, even though in reality this would probably be dark as well, I'm going to let this stay more or less at the base color, just so I can emphasize form. This will be shadow, this will be shadow, this will be shadow down in here, shadow, 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 inside of the airline, shadow, shadow. Let this come back to middle there, shadow here, a little bit of shadow along that edge, a little bit of shadow down in here. Actually, interestingly enough, I didn't draw a line for the thickness here. There would actually be a piece of, that'd be metal in there. Okay, coming over here. Once again, this tends to go into shadow over here. It's going to be hard to paint it that way, though, and have it look nice. Certainly this will be in shadow. This will be in shadow. I'll disperse some shadow over into here. Along here, I'll let the light come into here a little bit. Actually, there'll be a little bit of shadow here. I'll let light come through here a little bit and pick it up. I want shadow where this overlaps, but not a lot, just some. And I do want shadow down here. I want a little bit of shadow on the finger wire, finger rest, and I want a little bit of shadow on the under bezel. Some shadow on my prongs. Give them some form. A little bit of shadow in here. A little bit of shadow, like I said, as this rounds around, because it's a cylinder. Okay, that's good. Now I'm going to go with my light colors. That's that permanent yellow deep color, just like on our gouache palette. Get some on my prongs, on the under bezel, finger rest, prongs, prong, prong, prong. I'm going to let it catch here a little bit. I'm going to let it catch up on here, on the front edge of this. A dot of it here, a dot of it there, a glance of it off of this detail. I'm going to let it come into the bottom of my shank here, where the light would pass through and hit it. That line is not a bad line as far as the values go, but it was at a bad angle, so I had to fix it. A little bit here, and I'm going to let a little bit of it play into here. Okay. Like that. I'm going to now take my brush size down so I can do more detailed painting. I'm going to go into my highlights. Actually, I'm going to stay on light for a minute because I have reflected lights that I want to portray around the edge of the piece. Remember, those reflected lights or would give you a lot of reflections, a lot of reflective quality on your piece. Also, the light's going to catch the edge of this a little bit, so I have to decide how much of that I want to show. Light's going to catch on the edge of this. It's going to catch on the edge of this. I want reflected light on my prongs. I want a little bit of light in here because it becomes very boring. But I think I'm going to do that with the base color, my yellow ochre, and maybe come into that a little bit with the light color. Alright, now I'm going to move into my core shadow, which is my darkest brown. Here, here, here. A little bit of it is a cast shadow in here and in the airline. A little bit of it here and here. I want it to go in under here and lift up that cutout a little bit. I want some of it on my prongs, especially as a cast shadow from the stone here. A little bit there, a little bit here. Would like it to be to help separate out this sculpted element. Put a little bit of it on the sculpted element. Both as a cast shadow and as a reflective element. I have this cut in here where this comes and then comes back out again. I'm going to let this part go into shadow so that that sculptural quality is maintained. I want some core shadow on the shank. I used to put it, I've decided I don't like this highlight along this edge here. I used to put it right up into this corner, but I found that it looked too inky. So now what I do is I put it up close so that it does have that effect of a cast shadow without overstating it. And if it's not strong enough, I'll let a little bit of it play like that. Same thing over here, but less. I want some core shadow under here. I want some core shadow reflections along the front of the piece. Okay, I think that does it for that. Now I'm going to do my highlight. Oh, that's not highlight. There we go. As I come into the highlight, I'm going to take the opacity up to about 65–70%. I want my highlights to be strong. Now the rounded effect of this metal is showing up quite nicely. Along this edge where this cutout is, would catch some light. And I'm going to make sure that I catch it kind of extra hard because I want to see that scallop. Little highlight right along the edge over there. And then it's where I feel like I need it, really. This whole sculptural motif is looking a little dark to me. So I will bring in, and see, here's a case where that dark line for that corner is really hurting me. So in that case, I'll actually come in with my eraser on my gel layer, because remember, on a gel layer, eraser is just clear. And I'll take that out and then go back to my canvas. And paint that in. For a drawing it was okay to have there, but for a painting it wasn't. Okay. Highlights, a little highlight there, a little highlight in here. Let it catch a little bit, especially at because there's a kind of a blunt tip on both of these wires. Let it catch on that. A little bit on here. Maybe a reflection line of it over here that follows along that overhang a little bit. Maybe let it catch on that edge a touch. And the same thing here. Now I could paint a lot smaller than that, but if I go a lot smaller than that, I'm going to start putting in details that won't really print. And putting in details that won't really print doesn't help me. You want some bright highlight down at the bottom of the shank. With a couple of break off lines from that. Don't go crazy. It's easier to go crazy in Painter than it is in gouache. You can add so much detail perpetually that it becomes annoying. So kind of knowing when to say when is important when you're working in digital paint. Okay, so now I've got a lot of the form that I want. Now I'm going to look for things that I just don't think are working that well. And usually the workhorse for fixing things is usually the light color. There's really no reason that should have a highlight in it. And if I don't like something, I can undo it. So it's either going to be the light color or the ground color. Yeah, that's more user-friendly. It's looking a little dark through there. Okay, that's good. Back to my light color. Put in a reflection here. Put in a reflection line there. A little light in here. A little light in there. Don't want it on both sides of that corner though. A little light along there. Catch the bottom of the reflected light there. Okay. And really for a gold rendering, that's pretty good. That's okay. I can come in with a little bit more highlight. Okay. So now I'm going to do my center stone. My center stone, Peridot. I don't have a Peridot palette, color palette up, but I can work directly. It's a nice ground color for Peridot. And you can see now why I didn't care about painting over onto the stone. These colors will cover each other very nicely, so it doesn't really matter. And if you avoid the gold or the stone as you're painting the gold, what you'll leave is canvas. You'll leave white. You don't want to leave white. So it's better to overlap the stone and then come in and clean it up. Okay. I'm going to go to a dark color here. I'm going to take my color down to 20% and bring my brush up. I'm just going to do some diagonal strokes. And then I'm going to go in white on the other side and do the same. Okay. And I'm going to bring my opacity back up to somewhere around 70%, drop my brush down to 1514, and go into straight brush mode, straight stroke mode. And I'm just going to draw triangles. And when I'm done, I can't really hit enter, because if I hit enter, it's going to go back to where the brush stroke started, and I don't know where that is. So I'll just hit curved line and then go back to the straight line. I'm going to do the same thing in white. Just looking for angular lines that more or less come into the center. If I need to break and start a new one, I go back and hit that. And if I'm going to make a closed shape, I can just hit enter, and Painter will fill in that. But okay, so there's the pavilion roughed in. Now I'm going to go in and paint it in solid. For that, I use the smooth stroke. Take the brush stroke up a little bit. And decide which of these patterns that I've drawn are going to be my darkest color. Something that would be wonderful to do in gouache if you could, but you can't. And the same for the white. I'm not going to really do anything up in here that's solid in the white. I probably put a triangle in here of solid white. Okay. And then I will paint in my facets, my white facets. Do a preliminary job. It is important at this point to try and stay inside of those lines as best you can. And I will paint all of the facets on the light side of the crown, both star and upper girdle. Okay. In fact, I might choose. No, I won't. Not at this time. I can also paint the upper bezel facets. I'll paint this upper bezel facet white, and I'll paint this star facet white. And now I'm going to paint the star facet here dark. I'm going to paint this star facet dark. And this upper girdle facet dark. Finish painting this in dark. And this dark. And this dark. Okay? That is a lot of stuff going on in that stone. Okay? Now I'm going to do my glaze. To do my glaze, I'm going to put a layer between my canvas and my final drawing. So just start with my canvas, put a new layer, it's right here. I want that layer to be gel. Make a nice peridot color. Big stroke. And glaze my stone. Okay. Anywhere I want to bring the white back, since it's a gel layer, I can come in with white. I don't want to come in at full strength on the pavilion, but I can do some soft kind of strokes. On the crown, I'm going to play with it a little bit and see what I think. I don't want that one. I want this one. I want this one. I definitely want this one and this one. Not that one. I want this one. Okay. Now that I know that, I'm actually going to do the final facets for that with another layer, which I actually I title as facet. These are the opaque facets I want to be on top. These will be done close to 100% and at 1.4, which is the smallest real brush I want to use, and they'll be done using straight strokes. And these will cover my drawing, my initial drawing. When I want to do a new one, I've got to click smooth and then back. I'll just do smooth now. And I can use smooth to fill this in solid. What this does is it covers up the dark lines of the pencil drawing. Because for the actual facets, you don't necessarily want that outline, you know? You want to be able to defy the outline a little bit. And because this layer is on top, I can do just that. Okay, so this is close to being done. I would like to do on the same facets layer, I'm going to do a wash across the table. So I'll take this now back down to 20% or 19. Take the brush up a little bit. I'm going to make diagonal strokes like flat metal. Across the table with my stone. Now this one's questionable, but I don't mind it. I'll let it stay. Okay, so I've done now what I'm also finding is that I don't care for how white these two facets look. So I'm actually going to do another layer, another gel layer. Going to come back to my glaze color. I'm going to reglaze this facet and this facet. And I'm going to change the opacity on that layer until it's just a hint of color. That's fine. Okay, that's good. Now this drawing, this rendering is finished. I don't want to keep all of these crazy layers that I have. Oh, and before I do anything, I have to go to Canvas now and clean my drawing. Remember, I told you that I'm going back down to Canvas, so I can't hurt my original pencil drawing. That's good enough. Okay, so I want to pick this whole thing up off with another of my merged selections, merge copy. So draw a window, Control Alt C, Control, and I want this layer to be on top. So I'm going to select my top layer, because remember the layer that you have selected is the one that the new layer is going to go on top of. Control V. There it is. So now in theory, I can take all of this and delete it. And I probably won't lose my final drawing. I'll take these two and right click and delete them. And I'm going to clear my canvas. Okay? And I'm going to get rid of this layer, which is the wash. So I have my final drawing in case I want it, and I have my rendering. I would like to put a cast shadow underneath this. Okay. I want to check for a minute what happens if I go gel. See how that changed quality? It's exactly what we want to watch out. Oh, it changed quality because final drawing is on. Okay. Gonna check again. Gel, default. Okay. It's fine at gel. So I'm gonna make that a gel layer again. The reason I'm gonna make it a gel layer is so that I can draw a shadow on the canvas. I'm gonna go to my color set, platinum, grab a medium gray, grab a big brush, take my opacity down to about 20%, or more or less. Nice big brush. I'm going to zoom out a little bit and sketch in my shadow. Okay. I think something like that would be nice. Maybe a little bit tighter. Maybe something like that. Now you're noticing that this doesn't look nice at all. That's okay, because I'm going to pick it up off the canvas. I'm going to put it under my drawing. I'm going to take its opacity down to almost nothing, and then go back to my canvas. I just wanted a sketch of it so I knew when I actually painted my shadow where I was going to paint it. Oh, I have white, that's why. Now I'll paint it more carefully. That's pretty nice. Now, as you know, in gouache, we do these very easily with a blending stump. I don't have a blending stump in here per se, but what I do have, I'm going to get rid of this layer. What I do have is the ability to pick this up now. Once again, put it under my drawing, and I can take its slider down until I get the value that I want, and then I can come back into it with white. I can take the transparency down to 15-16%. Don't take your transparency below that, guys, because if you do, it just starts to fall apart. Make a nice big brush like 35. I can fade out my shadow. Okay. Now the portion of my shadow that's right under my ring, take my opacity back up, take my brush size back down, and zoom in and paint right on top of this. Because my ring is gel, I can see through it, and I can see when I've gotten all of that shadow cleaned out from underneath it. There. So one more time, select window around everything, Control Alt C, click on my top layer, Control V, going to delete these two. And this is my render. Okay? And that's my finished rendering. I know I talked about putting stones on this ring. I decided not to do it for the purposes of this rendering. This is enough. But that's it, guys. Finished rendering of a golden peridot ring based off my original sketch, which, just for fun, is located right there. Okay? Thanks for watching.